my good friend Dave Johnson joins us. Dave is a senior fellow with the Center for Media and Democracy, where I also write. He has been in the tech industry for many years, but he's a good guy. And he's out there in the Silicon Valley. He's designed video games for Atari and Imagic and other places, and he's done that work. But now, in the years that I've known him, he's mostly been a political writer, and we're going to talk some politics now. So, Dave, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, Richard, thanks for having me.
Oh, always great to talk to you. And one of the stories in one of the problems, I guess I would say, writing about politics nowadays is there's so many fireworks exploding at any given moment under this Trump, Ryan, Mitch McConnell government that some important developments and ideas get overlooked, I think, certainly by the mainstream media, and sometimes certainly by myself as well. I don't give them the attention they deserve. And one of them that I know you're writing about is the People's Budget, which the Congressional Progressive Caucus puts out every year. I've written about it in the past. Honestly, I've not had a chance to focus on it yet this year, but this is the progressive alternative to the mainstream budgets we used to see coming out of the Obama White House, and certainly an alternative to the Republican budgets that are being proposed. Trump has only given an outline, and then the Republicans in Congress, of course. So this was the incubator for, among other things, the career of Bernie Sanders, who was I believe, the first head of the Congressional Progressive Caucus when he was in the House. So you've looked at that, right?
I have.
So what did you see in there this year? What were some of the high points for you?
Well, first of all, you got to dig to find it, because one of the highlights of the Progressive Caucus budget is that the media simply will not let the public know it exists. The Progressive Caucus is, I believe, the largest group of Democrats in Congress. We often hear about how the Democrats are this or that. Well, there's different wings of the Democratic Party. The progressive wing, call it the Bernie Sanders wing if you want, comes up with these budgets every year to present a realistic alternative to what the country usually gets sold on. And the Progressive Caucus budget, what it does is it cracks down on corporate taxes, it adds new brackets to taxes on the wealthy, and then it does the things that we, the people, would want to see our government do. And let me give a little bit of an overview of that idea. We're supposedly a democracy where we, the people, are supposed to be making the decisions. In that form of government, we, the people, making decisions to spend money is by definition, government spending is by definition things that we want to do to make our lives better. Now, the Republican conservative corporate machine has pounded out these ideas that things like government spending is a bad thing. But by definition, if there's a democracy and we say, let's do this, then what we're doing is things to make our lives better. So here's an example of some of the things that they have in this budget. They put $2 trillion into a 21st century infrastructure program. Now, that sounds like a lot, but hold on. If you simply tell corporations they have to bring back the literally more than $2 trillion they have stashed in tax havens outside of the United States and pay the taxes they owe on that, right there you're getting almost $1 trillion at once. So
and that's,
this $2 trillion is over several years.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what is it, 5 years or something?
5 or more, yeah. But we have a $3.6 trillion deficit in our infrastructure, not just the roads, but the waterways, airports, ports, all kinds of things have fallen behind because since we started the tax cut frenzy, we've been deferring maintaining our infrastructure, never mind high-speed rail, nice things that would really boost our economy.
Yeah, that's so and by the way, just to interrupt for a second, Dave, that $3.6 trillion, as you know, comes from the American Society of Civil Engineers, which is not typically thought of as a hotbed of leftism, and that's based on their assessment of all the D grade. I think it's a D or D minus grade that they give to American infrastructure, and that includes things like the need to repair bad water pipes, like the ones that have poisoned children in Flint, and things like nuclear infrastructure that people
Right.
have a vested interest in making sure is well maintained, right?
Levies, levies, things like that.
Right.
Now, Trump says he's proposing $1 trillion spending plan, but first of all, he came out with his budget proposal that actually dramatically cuts infrastructure. What his plan is to give tax breaks to corporations so they can then go work on the infrastructure. Then we give them the infrastructure, our public property, and then they charge us tolls. That's he calls it $1 trillion plan. He says he's going to spur investment in infrastructure, private investment. So just to make that clear. Okay, affordable health care, they bring in the option for states and the means for states to transition to single payer, meaning Medicare for all health care systems. There's just so many things they do. Here's one. Ensures the justice system is fair and effective for all Americans by increasing funding for voter protection and legal assistance programs. What you want to do is you want to go to the website cpcbudget.org and just start looking at some of the details of this plan that we never get to hear about. In military, they don't immediately cut military. What they do is they change the way the military budget is analyzed and allocated to, first of all, they get rid of this thing called the sequester, which was just this silly across-the-board cuts thing. Then they change the way we look at the military to start taking out all the corporate handouts, the Lockheed, the General Dynamics, etc., things that get thrown in, and evaluate what we need, which then begins a process of cutting back in a lot of areas, which is so essential to do without threatening our security. There's just an entire list here of pathways out of poverty and empowering the middle class. Supports a minimum wage increase, collective bargaining rights, discretionary funding to invest in women, communities of color. There's one more point, because as I look at it, I keep coming up with new things. It's a very detailed and comprehensive plan. Every time they put this out, Trump put out his tax plan the other day, 2 pages, remember? This is a detailed, comprehensive plan by legislators who understand the process, the budgeting process, and come out with a plan that we could pass immediately.
And the other thing that's striking about this, and this is something that's always frustrated me about the Congressional Progressive Caucus budget, going back 10 years probably now, is that the media, the mainstream media, always dismisses it as kind of a fringe left position that they don't need to cover. But when you start looking at these individual budget items in it, most of the positions they take are the positions that are most popular with the American people. Don't cut Social Security, expand, protect Medicare, repair our infrastructure, create jobs, raise the minimum wage. On issue after issue, polling shows that this group, which is larger, I remember when they used to cover the Tea Party group, caucus within Congress and its budget like crazy, but this group, which as you point out is larger, is taking positions that are much more popular with the American people and yet never seems to get ink, as we used to say, or airtime in the mainstream media.
Well, they say it doesn't get ink because the public isn't rallying behind it, and the public isn't rallying behind it because it doesn't get ink. One of those kind of paradoxes, I'd say, because it's like, I'll give you, it's like if the Democrats had debates that people could see, maybe they, never mind, I won't get into that.
Touchy subject for a lot of people, but by the way, I agree with you. It's free advertising, and it's a way to get your message out to people who otherwise wouldn't watch. But
and the point being that by not covering it, which is intentional, they don't get the information out to people that this budget exists, that they could rally behind it, that they could call their members of Congress and say, hey, wait a minute, why aren't you backing this? And the members of Congress now kind of do dismiss it. And the ones that aren't in the Progressive Caucus, they can say, well, it's just a fringe idea, nobody's behind it, there's all these bearded hippies, etc. Yeah, exactly. So the
says one bearded hippie caucus to another.
Yeah, exactly. The Progressive Caucus of Congress, it's the Congressional Progressive Caucus, cpcbudget.org.
And another reason
Google
why
People's Budget and you'll find it.
Good. Thanks for that address. And another reason why this doesn't get coverage is that for many years in the Democratic Party, including through the Obama years, the left was dismissed. You know, my rule of thumb now is any Democratic politician that says, as Obama said in one of his first State of the Union messages, now my friends on the left think this, or my friends on the right think that, already out as far as I'm concerned. But as long as we're talking about that, I've talked on this show and in writing about President Obama's, former President Obama's, $400,000 speaking fee to a Wall Street investment bank, Cantor Fitzgerald. And you had some good thoughts about that, which you were putting into writing in terms of precedents and so on. So in the couple minutes we have left, what are your thoughts on that?
You bet. Well, President Obama is, as one writer named Gaius Publius, as his pen name says, harvesting the presidency, which has become a sort of a thing people expect now, that you go into public service and then you leave public service and make a lot of money. That is a core problem that we have in our politics, in our government right now, is that people in government can leave government and make a lot of money. And that has to affect decision-making. Now, I'm not saying that President Obama made any decisions based on the idea that later on he'd make a lot of money. I'm not saying that. I feel that what President Obama is doing sends exactly the wrong message out there right now. And let me give you a couple examples, past examples of what the problem here is. Jack Abramoff was a corrupt lobbyist who was convicted of being a corrupt lobbyist. He got caught bribing members of Congress and doing things about it. And he actually had a lot of remorse later and wrote a book about how wrong it was that he could get away with all the things he did and how it worked. And in the book, he said that his tactic was to go to congressional staffers and such and let them know that, you know, hey, if you're a nice young guy, you probably don't make a lot of money, nice young woman, probably don't make a lot of money, and, you know, there could be a place for you in my organization later. And everybody understood that that meant a very high rate of pay. And he said, once you say that, once you dangle that job offer, you've got them. They start working for you. They start doing what you say. They start putting your clients' things into the bills that they're writing for their member of Congress. Okay, that's one. Two, there was a guy named Billy Towson. He was a representative in charge of one of the committees that shepherded through the W. Bush prescription drug program in Medicare, which was basically a handout of millions, even tens of billions of dollars to the drug companies. And just a couple months after he got done shepherding that through Congress, he left Congress and went to work for, you ready for this? The drug companies, as a chief lobbyist for the drug company lobby for $2 million a year, just a few months after he finished shepherding that bill through. So, third example, a guy named Neil Borofsky came in to the government, I think it was called the Troubled Assets Relief Program, TARP. He was the inspector general overseeing how TARP was handled, and he was making a lot of noise about how bad the banks were, the fraud, all the stuff that had happened, and how we got to crack down and all of that. And remember, this was under Obama now, and a guy comes from the Treasury Department, a former senior Wall Street guy, comes in, has lunch with him. He's in the Treasury Department now. He sits him down and he says, Neil, have you thought about what you'll be doing after this job? He laid out for him, he said, the specific quote was, there can be consequences for what you're doing now. And it was very clear what he meant was you play ball, you go along with Wall Street, or your next job, you won't get a job. But if you play along, you're going to make a lot of money. Now,
right.
That was the thinking in the White House, okay, in the Treasury Department, for example. It's the widespread thinking across government. Go ahead.
And we've seen a lot of people go in both administrations, Republican and Democratic, Clinton and Obama as well as Bush, between Citigroup and the Treasury Department, between white shoe law firms defending crooked Wall Street banks and the Justice Department, Eric Holder, and so on. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there, but I will leave it with a good quote from Matt Stoller, who we both know, who's a longtime writer and policy guy, who said that, you start to develop the relationship with these wealthy institutions that your future career is going to make you very rich. So you start thinking of elected office like a preseason game. You'll try to look good, but you're not going to risk a career-ending injury. And that's what Neil Barofsky was being told. And that's what too many of our leaders, and I'm afraid from the top down, in my opinion, have been guilty of. So, Dave Johnson...
And that's why I'm feared that Obama is sending the wrong message. He should be cracking down on this, not getting money.
Yeah, he also should have been sending some Wall Street bankers to jail, but that's a whole other conversation. Yeah. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. Dave Johnson, as always, great to talk to you, and good work digging